My cousin got pregnant by my husband, and 6 years later, she invited me to her wedding as her maid of honor. But karma had other plans. 6 years ago, I divorced my husband after he cheated on me with my cousin. She had only stayed with us for a few weeks, and that was all it took. So yeah, that tells you exactly the kind of man I was married to. My ex and I are both 35 now. We met at work, dated for 3 years before he proposed, and got married when we were 27. We had been married for 2 years when everything fell apart. At the time, my cousin, let's call her Courtney, had just moved to our city to chase an acting career. She crashed with us for a couple of weeks before getting her own place. She was about 20, had dropped out of college, and my husband and I were almost a decade older. That's what made it even worse. She wasn't even around that long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but somehow she and my husband managed to sneak around behind my back. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. A few weeks after she moved out, she came over to visit, and that's when they dropped the bombshell. She was pregnant. And the father? My husband. Of course. My ex begged me not to leave. He swore up and down that he'd never hurt me again, that we could fix this, that we could still be a family. But some things, you just don't come back from. I packed my bags that same night, stayed with a friend for a few weeks, and filed for divorce as soon as I could. A few months later, it was done. Since then, I've had zero contact with my ex or Courtney. But I did make sure to tell his parents everything. I was heartbroken, and they needed to know exactly what their son had done. I also made it crystal clear that I was done supporting their daughter in any way. It took me years to get past this. Not just because my husband, the man I trusted, betrayed me, but because Courtney knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I had always treated her like a little sister. I let her live in my house rent-free, supported her dreams when even her own parents didn't. And what did she do? She slept with my husband and blew my entire life apart. After that, I cut her and her family off completely. And my parents also told me they'd cut ties with Courtney's parents, and I had no reason not to believe them. But now, I'm starting to have doubts that Courtney's mom is my dad's younger sister, and my mom has always been close with my aunt. They were even college roommates. So now, I can't help but wonder, have they really cut her off? Or have they just been keeping secrets from me? That's actually how my parents met. So I always knew it would be hard for them to cut ties with Courtney's family. They were all really close, but I was grateful they chose to do it for me, that they valued me enough to make that decision. To be clear, I never asked them to. It was their choice because they felt they couldn't keep a relationship with Courtney's parents in good conscience, or at least, that's what I thought. Because a few days ago, I got an invitation from Courtney, an invitation to her wedding. In the email, she asked me to be her maid of honor. It was bizarre. We hadn't spoken in 6 years. She had never given me a real apology, not even in that email. And suddenly, she wanted me to stand next to her on her wedding day? It was ridiculous. Look, 6 years have passed, and I've moved on from my marriage. But that kind of betrayal? You don't just forget it. So, I emailed her back, rejecting the invitation. I told her I wouldn't be attending and definitely wouldn't be her maid of honor. And while I was at it, I made it clear I never wanted to hear from her again. Yeah, I told her to go to hell. Honestly, I think I was pretty restrained, all things considered. But then my parents called me yesterday. Apparently, Courtney had been crying to her parents about my response, and they reached out to mine. She was devastated because she thought this was an opportunity for us to reconnect. And according to my parents, I was being petty for holding a grudge instead of forgiving her. They think that after all this time, I should let it go and take this chance to bring our families back together. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They know exactly how much I suffered because of her. So, yeah, we got into a fight. They told me I was being ridiculous, that everyone makes mistakes, that I've made mistakes too, and I can't judge someone forever. But here's the thing, my mistakes never involved sleeping with my cousin's husband. Courtney didn't just mess up. She made a choice. She knew exactly what she was doing. And let's not forget, she decided to keep the baby. But unfortunately for her, she had a miscarriage. If she hadn't lost that baby, she'd have a 5-year-old right now with my ex-husband. And let's be real, she would have taken my place as his wife. But after the miscarriage, there was no reason for them to stay together. And from what I heard, they broke up just a few weeks later. Her parents ended up taking her back to our hometown. If she hadn't lost that baby, she'd be living in my old house, married to my ex, raising a kid that never should have existed in the first place. And I don't think any sane person would expect me to just forgive and forget something like that. So, I really appreciate having the space to vent and share my story. Having to face all of this again has been incredibly difficult, but writing it out feels cathartic. Update 1. Yesterday, I decided to confront my parents. I have been avoiding them for a couple of days, but I needed to know the truth. Had they really cut ties with Courtney's family after everything that happened, or had they just lied to me to avoid conflict? When I called, I made sure to take control of the conversation right away. I wasn't going to let them talk first and steer things in their direction. So I asked them directly, no sugarcoating, if they had been in contact with Courtney and her family in the past few years. And immediately they hesitated. The second they started stumbling over their words, I knew something wasn't right. But I wasn't going to hang up without getting the truth. Eventually, they admitted that while they had distanced themselves from Courtney's family for the first couple of years after my divorce, they reconnected a few years ago, and they had been hiding it from me ever since. They knew I'd be upset. They just didn't want to deal with my reaction. But here's the thing, I wasn't just upset. It was worse than that. I hung up immediately, not because they had stayed in contact with Courtney's family, but because they lied about it. That's what hurt the most. They kept calling me after that, but I was furious. I ignored every call. Then the messages started. They kept apologizing, saying they regretted keeping it from me, that they only hid it because they knew it would hurt me. If they knew it would hurt me, then why are they so shocked by my reaction? I don't understand why they felt the need to go to such extremes. If they had just told me the truth from the beginning, maybe it still would have stung, but at least I would have known they were being honest with me. I might have even understood their reasoning, because at the end of the day, Courtney's mom is my dad's sister and my mom's best friend, but instead they chose to lie. And now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust them again. It's not like my parents told Courtney to ruin my marriage or anything. That was her choice, and I'm pretty sure they weren't happy about it either. I never really blamed them for what happened, but I was relieved when they distanced themselves from Courtney's family. It would have been incredibly awkward if our families had stayed in touch. However, if they had chosen to keep in contact and been honest with me from the start, I wouldn't be nearly as upset as I am now. That's the real issue here. They lied to me. Then they kept up that lie for years. And even now, instead of acknowledging how deeply they hurt me, they're pressuring me to make amends with Courtney, to just forgive and move on. They're still thinking about themselves, not me. And honestly, I can't imagine anything more selfish. After a while, I just couldn't take it anymore that I blocked them, because at this point, I don't want anything to do with these people. They clearly don't respect me, and they don't understand me, and that's the bare minimum in any kind of relationship. I've already been betrayed by the people I loved once. I have a huge issue with betrayal, but if I manage to live without her, I'm pretty sure I can live without them too. Of course, it's going to hurt. I know that it'll probably hurt even more because for the past 6 years, the one thing that helped me move forward was knowing my parents were on my side. But now I know they've betrayed my trust too. And as painful as it is, I don't want people like that in my life. I think I've had enough pain and betrayal to last a lifetime that I don't need any more. Update 2. I hadn't heard from my parents in 2 weeks since I blocked them, at least. Not until yesterday morning. That's when they decided to show up at my house, uninvited. The second I opened the door, they started talking. They said they'd been feeling incredibly guilty about what they did and wanted to apologize in person. They told me they had tried to reach out multiple times over the past 2 weeks, but since I had blocked them, they had no way to get through. Well, yeah, that was the whole point. With no other option, they decided to fly out here and confront me face to dash face. To fix things. They didn't want to make me angry. They knew they had been selfish beyond forgiveness, but still, they wanted to try and apologized, and I was skeptical about even talking to them. I was still furious about their lies. But I decided to give them a chance that I let them in. They started by telling me that when they decided to reconcile with Courtney's parents, they had been going through a really difficult time, which honestly made sense. Courtney had made a lot of terrible decisions. She was never a great student. She had struggled to get into college in the first place, and when she finally got accepted into a decent university, she dropped out to chase her dream of becoming an actress. I actually supported her decision at the time. I mean, she wasn't incredibly talented, but I'd seen some of her performances, and I could tell she had passion. With time and experience, I figured she'd improve. So she left college and moved in with us to pursue her dreams. What I didn't know was that her dreams apparently included my husband. Courtney's parents had already been worried about her. Her older siblings had all followed a more traditional path in life, and they were happy with that. But Courtney was different. She didn't fit into that mold. They knew how impulsive she could be. Trust me, they didn't have to tell me that. And then, just a few months after moving in with us, they found out from me that she was pregnant with my husband's child and had completely destroyed my marriage. As if they weren't already concerned enough about her, I dropped that bomb on them. They tried to convince her to come back home, but she refused. She insisted she was keeping the baby. She insisted she was staying with my husband. While I was going through my divorce, her parents were fighting their own battle, trying to get their daughter back on the right path. But Courtney refused to listen. They were really struggling. And on top of that, my parents had cut them off too. They had to face it all alone. When Courtney ended up having a miscarriage and finally moved back home, her parents didn't even know where to begin. So they started reaching out to my parents, looking for emotional support. They apologized over and over again for what Courtney had done, even though, to be fair, it wasn't their fault. At first, my parents ignored them, but eventually they gave in. They responded, offered emotional support, and on top of everything, the rest of the family had started avoiding Courtney's parents too, because even though we had all tried to keep things as quiet as possible, rumors spread, people talked. And soon enough, the gossip had taken on a life of its own. I'll admit, part of that might have been my fault that I had talked to a couple of cousins about what happened. And even though I asked them to keep it quiet, there's no way of knowing who might have told someone else. Not that I feel guilty about it. I have every right to talk about what happened to me. Even though things have gotten better over the years and the family doesn't avoid them like the plague anymore, things still aren't the same. Courtney's parents have expressed a lot of regret and guilt over everything that happened. Even they haven't completely forgiven Courtney, but they've made peace with the situation because, at the end of the day, she's still their daughter. My parents told me that they've been Courtney's parents' only source of support and strength. Other than them, Courtney's parents were practically shunned by everyone for a while. My parents didn't want to abandon them completely, especially not for something that wasn't technically their fault. Not when they were dealing with the consequences of their daughter's actions every single day. But at the same time, my parents also knew I was going through hell. They didn't want to hurt me by keeping in touch with Courtney or her family. And without realizing it, they started lying to me. They thought about telling me the truth at some point, but they never did because they were afraid of hurting me, afraid of making me angry. But most of all, they were terrified of losing me. They thought that if I ever found out, I'd cut them out of my life completely. So they kept lying and feeling guilty about it. And even recently, when they tried to pressure me into forgiving Courtney, it was because they were tired of hiding their friendship with her parents. They apologized over and over again for what they said. They admitted that they had no right to push me like that, knowing everything I'd been through. And they finally acknowledged that it was my choice whether or not to forgive Courtney. That I appreciate that. At the very least, that I appreciate that they're trying to make things right. And I'm glad they finally told me the truth. But still, I need time. Did I need time to process this? Accept what happened before I can even consider whether or not I want them in my life again, because I've been through so much. And they'll never understand what it was like to be in my shoes. They have no idea what it's like to be betrayed by the people you love, not just once, but over and over again. The pain, the disappointment, it all becomes unbearable. They seem to understand where I was coming from. They told me to take all the time I needed and that they would wait for my response. And that's exactly what I plan to do. I need time to process everything before deciding what comes next. Update 3. It's been a few days since my last update, and while I still haven't made up my mind about my parents, something unexpected happened. I got a couple of messages from Courtney's parents. I haven't spoken to them in 6 years. Not because I blamed them, but because they were her parents and I knew exactly whose side they were on. After everything that happened, any kind of conversation would have been awkward for all of us, so we just avoided each other. That was that. Their messages caught me off guard. They told me they had never properly apologized for everything that happened in the past, but now they wanted to. They admitted that maybe it wasn't even their place to say sorry for what their daughter did, but as parents, they couldn't help but feel somewhat responsible. They believe that, no matter how old your kids get, their actions still reflect, in some way, the way they were raised. At least, that's what they told me. For the longest time, they didn't reach out because they felt like they didn't deserve to talk to me after what Courtney did. At the end of the day, she destroyed my marriage. And sure, my husband was just as much to blame, but the fact that it was Courtney, the fact that she made the choice to do this, made it so much worse. If he had cheated on me with someone else, I still would have been devastated, but the fact that it was her, that's a wound that will never fully heal. Still, they wanted to apologize, even if I didn't accept it. They said that beyond what happened with Courtney, they deeply regretted helping my parents keep the truth from me. As if they hadn't already done enough damage to my life, they played a part in putting my own parents in a position where they had to lie to me. They admitted they had no right to do that. And for that, on top of everything else, they were truly sorry. They admitted that they had pressured my parents into lying and had even helped them keep up the facade. For all of that, they were truly sorry. They recognized that while they had also suffered because of Courtney, I was the one who had endured the most pain because of all of them. No matter how many times they apologized, there was little they could do to change the past. But still, they felt the need to say sorry, and that's why they reached out to me. They hoped that, somehow, I could find it in my heart to forgive them one last time. I've probably read their message at least 30 times in the last few hours, and I still don't know how to feel about it. One thing is clear, this situation isn't as simple as I once thought. It's not just black and white. No matter what, I was the one who suffered the most, but I also can't deny that others have faced their own struggles because of this. I don't know what to say. It's not that I don't feel bad for them. I do. Because of Courtney, her parents also had to suffer, and I know they're good people. They didn't deserve this. But I'm a good person too. I didn't deserve this either. This whole situation is just incredibly confusing. And if I was already overwhelmed before, their message has only made it harder to figure out what I want to do. Update 4. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and until recently, I had been avoiding everyone. I needed space and time to process everything I had learned. It was a lot to take in over such a short period, especially the truth about my parents. I didn't want to rush into making any decisions. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what to do about my aunt and uncle, and what to do about my parents. As for my cousin, that decision is final. I have no desire to have her in my life again, and that's not going to change. When it comes to my aunt and uncle, I've decided to forgive them, for lack of a better word. It's not really about forgiveness, but more about choosing not to hold on to resentment. I sent them a message letting them know that we're okay, but they shouldn't expect us to be close. At the end of the day, they are still Courtney's parents, and I won't pretend that they should cut her off for my sake. So in the end, things are settled, but from a distance. My aunt and uncle appreciated my response since that was really all they wanted. They understand my feelings and respect my decision to cut ties with my cousin. So that's where we stand now. When it comes to my parents, though, it's a completely different story. They deliberately deceived me. They kept secrets from me for years, and even tried to push me into attending a wedding I had no business being at. That's not something I can easily forgive. I've told them they will remain blocked, and I don't want them showing up at my house unannounced. Actually, I don't want them showing up at all, because they won't be welcome. I know some people might not agree with me cutting my parents out, but this is where I stand right now. And now that I've removed all the unnecessary drama, I suddenly have a lot more free time. Time that I plan to use for shopping for a beautiful dress for my cousin's wedding. Okay, I had to lighten the mood after all the chaos my parents dragged into my life. My cousin is delusional if she thinks I would actually attend her wedding. And she's even more out of touch if she believes I'd be her bridesmaid. The only reason I'd even consider it would be just to smash her face into the cake. But honestly, I wouldn't waste money on airfare for that. And even if she covered my flight, I still wouldn't waste my time. Honestly, even bringing her up feels pointless. But at least it's better than some of my other options. Update 5. I don't even see this as wasting energy on my cousin. I see it as time well spent. And honestly, this update has made my day. Looks like my dress for my cousin's wedding won't be needed after all because the wedding is off. But the best part isn't just that it got canceled, it's how it happened. My aunt and uncle actually did something that I respect far more than anything my parents ever did. They sat my cousin's fiancé down and told him the full story of what happened with me years ago. They weren't sure if he knew, but judging from his reaction, he was completely in the dark. They weren't trying to ruin the wedding. They just believed he had the right to know the truth because they had never supported their daughter's actions. And guess what? He ended the engagement. He didn't want to marry someone with a history of cheating. Honestly, I think that was a smart move. Because let's face it, if someone has done it before, there's a good chance they'll do it again. This is the part where I should say my cousin's ex-fiancé is an honorable man, someone I admire, a true hero we should all look up to. But before anyone jumps to conclusions, let me tell you what happened next. Lately, I've been in touch with my aunt and uncle a bit more. The only thing keeping that from happening before was my cousin. But now, she's completely cut them off after what they did. Honestly, though, I don't think they're the villains in this story. And since we've been talking more, they've shared some interesting little details about my cousin's ex. After a few weeks, don't ask me exactly how many, he started dating one of my cousin's friends. And before you think I'm making this up, let me be clear. It was my aunt and uncle who strongly hinted that maybe, just maybe, their ex-future son-in-law wasn't as loyal as he wanted others to be. It makes sense, doesn't it? He wanted fidelity in a partner, but when it came to himself, well, the rules seemed a bit more flexible. All I can think is, birds of a feather flock together. And as for the friend, well, she's not exactly any better than my cousin or her ex. She just happened to walk away with the prize, if you can even call him a prize. That said, I'll admit I'm a little biased. The fact that he did this to my cousin earns him a few points in my book, even though I know that's not the right way to look at it. But come on, this is who we're talking about. If anyone deserves a taste of their own medicine, it's her. And then there's my parents. They destroyed their relationship with their own daughter over a wedding that never even happened. What's next? Investing in Beanie Babies?